Hello, N-Star trainees. Today we'll be listening to Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Man, Poor Man, special for the LinkedIn site. So enjoy. Also, too, I want to make one course correction. The course correction is with all the government spending. You need to watch Anthony Davis, 10 Myths About Government Debt. It is not his figure, the actual real figure, somewhere around 178 trillion. Thank you.
In 1980,
The debt to GDP was 30%.
debt to GDP was 30%. So that meant if you made $100,000 American, then 30% went to pay off the debt.
Today it's 140%.
America is technically bankrupt.
And people say, well, what's different from 1970 to today is we're broke, we're bankrupt. 30% debt to GDP to 140% debt to GDP, that's like you were making 100,000 in 1971, let's say, but you had 30,000 in expenses. Today you're making 100,000, but your expenses are 140,000 a year.
Millennials are bankrupt with student loan debt, and they keep printing more money, raising taxes, which makes it almost impossible for you guys to get ahead. I mean, you guys are being screwed by your own government, and especially your school teachers, who are like my poor dad. They're good people, but they've never studied economic philosophy. So economic Marxism is like Christianity or Buddhism and all that. They're just philosophy. So it's between your left ear and your right ear. That's all it is. So if you like the idea of printing money and giving it to poor people, which they don't do, the money goes to school teachers, you're a Marxist. If you like printing money, you're a Lenin. So, but they don't know that. They don't know that. That's the problem.
I'm making a fortune in Bitcoin today, not because I have that much Bitcoin, but I speak for the younger generation. And I always warn that the baby boom generation's in serious trouble. Because they drank the Kool-Aid. We were born during one of the biggest booms in world history. 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. And the economy boomed because they could print trillions of dollars that were fake. When I was a kid, nobody was in the stock market. So between like 61 to 81, the old guys like the baby boomers, they wouldn't go in the stock market because they were in the bond market, and the bonds were safer. So what they do is create this thing called a 401k and the IRA to kind of force the baby boomers into the stock market. And who controls the stock market? Well, the central banks, the Treasury, and Wall Street. And so all these baby boomers have been set up. I know that because that's what I study. Baby boomers have been the luckiest generation in history. I mean, they didn't do jack and they got rich. They put money in the stock market and they got rich. Then what happened is 87, the stock market crashes. In 87, the stock market crashed and, what's his name? Greenspan went in there with the PPT, the plunge protection team. Greenspan came in and said, we can't let the baby boomers get out because then we all get poor. So the idiot baby boomers stayed in. It was called the Greenspan put or the PPP, the plunge protection team, and says, don't worry, we'll always protect stocks. But to do that, they had to print trillions of dollars to keep the stock market propped up so that baby boomers didn't lose everything. They propped the stock market up to keep the baby boomers in. So here's baby boomers.
$80 million. That is how much I've generated with digital real estate. And if you don't know what that is,
They, the Leave It to Beaver and the Ozzie and Harriet crowd, for those of you old enough to remember that. And they drank the Kool-Aid, and now we have Social Security that's broke, Medicare that's broke, and the stock market's set to crash. What else could go wrong? And we have, in 1970, the debt to GDP was 30%. Today it's 140%. And people say, well, what's different from 1970 to today is we're broke, we're bankrupt. 30% debt to GDP to 140% debt to GDP, That's like you were making $100,000 in 1971, let's say, but you had $30,000 in expenses. Today you're making $100,000, but your expenses are $140,000 a year. And so the boomers are in serious, serious, serious trouble if they don't keep this bond market and stock market propped up.
And education is more important than ever before. But the problem I have with school, traditional education, number one today is creating young people like you to be greatly in debt. I went to military school. I never did well. I flunked out of school because I can't write, and now I write books. You know, this here is a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, written by my friend G. Edward Griffin. If you want to understand why you guys are being screwed, read this book here. It's about the Federal Reserve Bank, which was formed in 1913. But that was the same year that the 16th Amendment was passed, which allowed taxation. So we were going for communist control of the central bank, the central planning central bank. And then taxation, 16th Amendment. It started back then. And then I studied this book here. It's called The Grunch of Giants, written by Buckminster Fuller. I do study. And if your generation wants to get ahead, you've really got to study. Education is the only business where you're allowed to blame the customer for the teacher's incompetence. You see, in business, I can't do that. You know, if my students are failing or my customers are failing, then I'm responsible for it. But how in the world can these teachers get away with blaming their customers for the teachers and the educational system incompetent? Now, let me say this one more time. Education is more important than before. But what the heck are you learning? Which is stupid. This here is a silver dollar. It's worth about $30 today if you can find one. They're out. And this here is a gold eagle. It's worth about $2,000. And this here is called the Zimbabwe dollar. It's $10 million. So what's going to happen in the near future, you millennials are so stupid, you'd rather take $10 million than get a gold coin, a silver coin, or Bitcoin, or Ethereum. Because your school teachers are so stupid, they think this is important. This is $10 million. Oh, I'm going to get a pay raise. I'll get $10 million. But what it does, it destroys, it makes the gold more valuable, silver more valuable, and Bitcoin more valuable. Why don't they teach you that? Because the teachers would rather have this piece of trash. For young people, I think your financial education is crucial, but it begins with the economic philosophy. Are you a Marxist? Are you a Leninist? Are you a Maoist? Or are you a fascist Hitler? I would say most people are fascists like Hitler.